It's now time for The Way It Is, and quick reintroduction of the guests that we have in the panel. Gabriel Muthuma, who is a governance consultant, Ambrose Weda, who is a lawyer, Michael Agwanda, governance consultant, and Honorable Joe Mutambo. Gentlemen, thank you for joining us this morning. Today is the 30th of September, which is the last day that the Treasury had given for, or Central Bank, let me say, had given for the old 1,000 shilling notes to be back in circulation or lose out. Now, there's two arguments to this particular demonetization exercise. In India, we saw a huge influx of people bringing in their money to try and have it, cleaned, so to speak, so that they have the new note. In Kenya, that has not happened. Half of the money that Central Bank was expecting to have has not come back. I think what has come back is just slightly above half. So there are those who argue that this has been a successful exercise. Why? Because those who possibly are holding that money have lost out. There are others who argue it has not been successful because the economy will hurt by virtue of the fact there is that amount of money out there. Let me start with you, Ambrose Weda, on your thoughts on this as to whether that is a gain by CBK or could it be a strategy that did not work as they expected?
I think the CBK was obeying the Constitution. The Constitution actually required that we mop out old currency that had portraits of the former president or the first president. That was a constitutional requirement from 2010, and they had to do it. The only thing is that in the process of doing it, they brought in other motives. They brought in other reasons. We are doing it because some people are holding money. We are doing it because of this and that and that and that, thereby creating panic. Whether or not this money is available, assuming the amount which has not been returned is available, please let's know that this is what we call fiat money. Fiat money is paper money which has authority from the voice of the sovereign.
What we call legal tender.
Yes, the sovereign says it is money. The sovereign can wake up in the evening and say it is a piece of paper, and it stops. It is the confidence people have in it that makes it money. So when you keep your 1 million shillings in your house, by midnight today it is 1 million shillings. Tomorrow it will be kilos of paper. It does not hurt the economy. It hurts the economy of an individual. But overall, the same sovereign will inject more paper money to fill in the gap.
But that would be true if it was just 1 million shillings. But we're talking about over 100 billion shillings.
Yeah, 100. I'm using 1 million as an example so that you understand the bigger context. So that the 100 billion, if it was in the hands of an individual, today it is worth 100 billion. By tomorrow it will be heaps of paper.
And that's money that is not going to be in the circulation. And that's where now the issue of the economy comes in.
Now, this is the part I'm explaining, and get it, that it is money, but it is paper money. Paper money issued by the sovereign, meaning if you remove your 100 billion, tomorrow the same sovereign will print the new ones and inject in the economy. How does it inject it? It will inject it through expenditure, through investment. They'll come and say, we are doing this, the government has this money. And so when people talk about money which has been whatever, I really don't understand.
Gabriel, do you agree with Weda?
Weda has a point, but where it gets hazy is where the government will reintroduce that money. He's correct to say, he's correct to say, and actually it's quite doable, that, if you look at the argument of UNDP, and if actually India and the United States, they've done that, and their measure could actually be a little bit different from what we are doing. Their measure was, probably to stabilize their currency or actually fight inflation. That has, or illicit money trade, if you will. And they've done that for various reasons. And I also agree, we can stabilize our shilling through this, but the hazy place which, now the government must, try and find out is where they'll reintroduce that 100 billion. At what level? What Weda is saying through reinvestment in government projects, I don't think that will work entirely. If you're telling me you'll reintroduce that money through supporting SMEs, I think that can be understood and that can be taken in good light. But reintroducing it on projects, I think we are going to suffer some element of loss. The introduction part, the introduction of that 100 billion is, I think, what is going to be an uphill task.
And in your opinion, what is the effect that would have should the government not be able to reintroduce that 100 billion shillings? Because SMEs are likely to suffer. Honestly,
taking 100 billion out of the economy, even though Weda may think it's little money, he will tell you still there's going to be some pain. There's going to be some pain. Actually, at this time when many companies are cutting jobs, when you can tell the Mwananchi is complaining, SMEs are actually suffering. Remember, banks are still not lending as they used to the SMEs because of the interest rate cap. You just saw the cigarette manufacturers and alcoholic beverages, they wrote to the president asking him not to ascend to the financial bill of 2019. Why? Because the tax regiment is not right. We have seen companies that have sent employees, all of them, home. So at what point, all right, should this be introduced? And I think, Mike, that is going to be an uphill task.
Okay.
So either way, the government must sit down and fight. Your phrase actually talks volumes. And if they would get it through SMEs, I think that would be great.
That would be great. Honorable Mtambo.
I will first start by asking my good friend, Weda. He's a good lawyer. Just to concentrate on being a lawyer. Because
to leave the economy.
And leave the economy to people who understand business. And to understand business is not by the books or papers. It's to understand the logic and what business is all about. Business is about money, yes, for your information. The reason why a country would say we want all the 100 or 1,000 shillings back is because they need that money in circulation. Yes. That is exactly what happened in India. The money was not being circulated. And somebody came in and said, because there's no money in circulation, I'm going to give an amnesty. If you have some money somewhere, bring it back, otherwise it will not be useful. That is actually the logic behind to have that money back. If it is so easy for government just to print money, they would say, stay with your 1,000. We are going to print more. Why do they do that? It is because it's not possible. Printing of money and money being available to government to use, there are procedures. And for any government to pump in money into circulation, there is also a protocol which is followed. What am I saying? For a country to lose 100 billion, that is a sound warning of disaster. Let me tell you the truth. Because when that money is not in circulation, there is a very huge impact into economy. We wanted that money back to circulate. Whether it is given back, because you can say now we have returned this, we are printing this in exchange. You cannot just say we are just going out of blue to print 100 billion. Then the country will be led to print more and more and more and more. And people will argue, laymen will argue, why is the country borrowing and we have Deraru on Thika Road? Why are we not printing ourselves and get the papers? People will argue it that way. The logic which makes the government borrow, not to print in Deraru, is the same logic which will make the country want that 1,000, which Wada is hiding somewhere in Kisumu. And we need that money. For my understanding would have been this. It is a good thing to call this money back. But the government could have said that if you have 1 billion, just bring it back. We will not ask you where you get it from. And if you cannot explain where you get it from, we are going maybe to fine you 10% of that money. That could have made sense. Because the moment you put a cap, tell us where you got this money. This is another problem And that is actually our undoing. The day we woke up and we said we want Wanda Mutambo or whoever to explain to us, when you go to the bank and you say where you got your 1 million, because you need to understand
but the argument from Treasury as to why you need to explain where that money came from is because this exercise was two-pronged. One being that it's a constitutional requirement for us to change the money, but secondly, the issue of corruption. The issue that there are people who are holding money which is illegally gotten, because remember the bank introduced measures where if you're, for instance, there's a sudden influx of money into your account, you would have to explain just by virtue of trying to mop out corruption.
Today, whether you have been corrupt or you're not corrupt, you will have to go through the pain of explaining your 1 million shillings. Whether you are corrupt, even bishops, they have to explain that. Even one who is a good lawyer, I will hire Wada and I know he charges expensively. I will pay him 2 million. He'll have to go through the pain of explaining that 1 million when he's depositing it. So that does not mean that we have achieved what we really wanted. Are we achieving it by having 100 billion not being returned? The answer is no. Are we hurting our economy or we are not? The answer is yes, we are hurting our economy. So what I'm arguing is that we could have let people bring this money, because putting all these people to jail does not serve any purpose.
More like an amnesty.
Yes, if we are giving amnesty of a gun, which is more dangerous. 1,000 shillings and a gun, which is more dangerous.
We're talking about 100 billion shillings
no,
here.
We are talking about 100 billion out there. So the thing is here, and this is my advice to my good government: give amnesty to these people. Tell them to return this money. Because Kenya is a developing country. We have not yet developed. And if we are talking about being developed, and we want to be developed, and we do not want money, we want Wada to ban, because I know he has some, to ban whatever he has, then we are hurting ourselves.
DCI might be waiting for you out here when we finish, for you to explain where you got that information from. Michael Agwanda, are we winning as a country, or is this demonetization a total failure in your opinion?
In my opinion, first of all, there was a reason why demonetization came into being. And I think you can count them. It was the government was realizing that people are holding money, keeping money and not using it. Maybe they had too much that they were not sure of the transition that was taking place. After 2007, violence, 2017, people were not sure whether there would be a smooth transition. And so people were holding money. Another thing is there was less money in circulation. And as a result, we are told that the CBK was actually looking for 227 billion that they knew was out there, but they didn't know where it was. 227 billion is not a change for the economy. It means somebody is holding that money, and that money is not in circulation. That means we are being starved of cash. Remember that what you have out there in circulation determines how much you need in foreign exchange. For example, if you need dollars, they will want to know what you have in your market. That will determine how much shilling into a dollar will be. So it's a serious matter. You don't hold 100 billion. When you hold 100 billion out there, it means that your shilling is going to depreciate. And when it depreciates, the dollar goes up, and then it makes your international trade more or less too expensive to do business. Another thing that you need to know was illegal counterfeit was saturating this country. And you've seen in the last few years where people, some of them are even having them in the bank, in safes, illegal counterfeit. And as a result, mainly it was the 1,000 illegal counterfeit. And that needed to be wiped out. The only way to wipe out that is for people to bring legitimate money to the bank. And if it is illegal, it means it ceases to be in circulation. Another reason that we were looking at why the government thought this was very important was corruption. Corruption was becoming a big thing. People were not putting money through the bank in corrupt deals. Instead, they will keep it and buy huge things. And you're wondering, but where is this money coming from? It's not passing through the bank. It's not building the economy. We don't have a record for it. Now, what we do, we need to make sure that this 1,000 note goes. Again, 2010 Constitution came up, and there were features in our money that needed to get out. And as a result, by Constitution, we needed to change our money. is it hurting this economy or not? 100 billion that is not being required. Remember, it's hurting the economy. The CBK has spent about 15 billion to print the new 1,000 notes, if you're not aware. Now, 15 billion, if it is just spent like that, you know, that's not something we can wish away. They spend a lot of money to print the new notes. There are 100 billion that is not there. If it is not in circulation, it simply means that we will lose our buying power as a country. If that 100 billion was supposed to buy building material, that guy who manufactured the building material is not going to get that 100 billion. And what does that mean? It means the employee that was supposed to be employed will not get at 100 billion. The mamamboga, who is, you know, the guy carrying the gunias in the evening and going back home with 300 shillings will not get that money. Somebody is going to suffer somewhere. People are going to lose jobs, just like my friend Muduma is talking about. And that means there's a void in our financial circulation. That's not easy for the economy. We've got to struggle. And what will happen in that case? For your information, it means that our shilling will depreciate. When you have less shilling in the market, your dollars are going to go up. And what happens in that case? It means that things will be expensive. It will hurt the economy.
Cost of importation, of course, becomes more. But then somebody might argue again, and unfortunately, we are more of a consuming economy than producing, such that if we were exporting more, then when the dollar is stronger for us, then that would be a benefit. But now, since we import more, whether I see you still disagree.
I hear these voodoo explanations and people. Let me explain what an economy is. An economy is the amount of goods and services, the value. And then because you have to exchange them, you have to put a forum, a means. So money is a means of exchanging these goods.
Correct.
You understand that? And the money that is used is not the value of the economy. The economy is actual things, physical things, roads, houses, whatever, innovation, intellectual property. That is the value in the economy. Now, how do you exchange them between people? Money. What kind of money do we have? Fiat money. Fiat money is money where government says, this piece of paper will be 1,000 shillings. This one will be 100. This one will be, they are the same paper made in the same way, they cost the same, but the denominations. Now, when you retain the money, when government says we have changed the currency, it is at that time that to exchange the value you have already acquired, that you are given the new currency. If you retain it, it becomes a piece of paper. When it becomes a piece of paper, it does not change the value of the goods and services in an economy.
But
it affects the means of exchange.
What about the circulation? Because this amount of money cannot, that 100 billion, government cannot walk into De La Rue tomorrow and say, okay, since the 100 billion is not there, here's the 100 billion to replace, and whoever has kept the money, keep the money.
Now listen. Let me finish. Please let me finish. Yeah, let me finish. We are wasting time. Just let me finish. Yes.
I need you to conclude so that we can.
Yes.
I want us to talk about something else.
Actually, the fiat money, the government prints it. And in fact,
are you suggesting that 100 billion shillings that is missing, government will just print?
I'm telling you, government will print that to bridge that gap. Immediately becomes a piece of paper tomorrow. They will be in the process, if that is the value of the economy, they'll be in the process of filling it up. In fact, sometimes they raise it, and that's how it becomes bigger. They will print it.
There had to be a reason. There had to be a reason as to why government moved in this direction. Yes. And the two reasons, there could be more, but the two reasons that I'd like to believe why the government went into this was, first of all, to make the money cleaner and digitize it, all right? And when you do that, you actually bring the money that's not available from the woodworks, you bring it now to where you can actually have good, proper methodologies. Remember, we do not have a law that says, Michael Gangauda and Mheshimiwa can not open their Kenya Bankers Association of mattress, whatever. People who just go and pound money and put money. They, even with the new money, like Weda is saying, he still has not provided a solution, because if people are into the habit of holding money, tomorrow they'll start holding the same new notes. So the government wants people to come out and have that money digitized, gotten somewhere. You still have people who have money. Yesterday they didn't have that money in cash, but it's in electronic form. They're M-Pesa, right? But there's a Mama Mboga somewhere who probably have not heard about this story. There's somebody out there in Uganda and Tanzania who still were transacting in Kenya shillings. They still have the old currency. Albeit the fact that it will be paper tomorrow. There are people who are still have not come into contact with the knowledge that this money will be. And you remember the governor of the central bank actually put a picture on Twitter where somebody had put money into that Safaricom. You remember? There are so many people, and Mheshimiwa will tell you, in remote areas who still do not know about this directive.
I want us to move on with this conversation, but let's talk about the effect. There are those people who don't have that money. So what do you think, or what do you say is the effect of that 100 billion by tomorrow not being in central bank, in the economy? What does that mean to me and you?
Mike, it will be felt. It will be felt. Our shilling will suffer a little. That's a given. And that's why I was telling you, the government, even though Weda thinks it's pocket change, the government must find a place to introduce that money. Where will that place be? Will it be at the local mwananchi level or the bigger projects? If it goes to the bigger projects, we'll suffer immensely. If it goes to the mwananchi lower, uko chini, you will realize people will actually have a better footing. So the introduction, the reintroduction of that money matters a lot.
Matters a lot.
Let me explain how it will affect. It will affect us tomorrow. The dollar will go up.
Yes.
Simple as that.
Yeah.
What does that mean? Anything you are bringing in the country, which you buy the dollar, the price will go up.
Correct.
We don't have fuel yet.
We will be here next Monday.
Just that. Yes, I exchange on daily basis. I'm a trader. I exchange daily. And I know the effect of dollar and Kenya shillings. And I know how they fluctuate. On every second, the dollar will go up. The shilling will go down. That means if you are getting a dollar today for 100 shillings, tomorrow I'll get it at 101, 102. That means that anything, name it, which I buy with the dollar will change, and that will affect my life in one way or the other. And that is what I want my good lawyer here to understand.
All right.
Simple as that.
Simple thing. My friend Weda is forgetting that it's not easy just to print money. A good example is Zimbabwe. The last few years here, they've been printing money and printing it en masse. And what happened with their money that was being printed? It was not recognized by their neighbors. In fact, to an extent, even their own country did not recognize the money. They had now to use dollar, not their money. That's the danger with printing money. It is an international issue. It's not just a Kenyan issue, which you will say, oh, we can print and just add more money. The more money you add into the economy, if it is not in tandem with the economic growth and the GDP of that country, the lesser value of your currency is. And therefore, if we know that Zimbabwe printed a lot of money and then it just went into waste, Kenya will not do that because Kenya is trading with the international partners and they know. And by the way, you're saying, oh, we are a consumerism industry. Not necessarily, because there are 5,000 to 6,000 vehicles being imported in this country every single month. That's not a small thing. When we look at even tea that is being exported, we look at flour that is being exported into this country, this is a huge industry that is earning Kenya a lot of foreign exchange. No wonder our shilling has been stable at between 100 and 102 until the other day when we suddenly realized that money is not coming in. It's short to 103, as he's saying. If you've been looking at the market, that simply means it's going to hurt the economy. And the only thing that we need to do, the CBK must tell Kenyans that where is this money? Because I also believe that there are about 900 accounts that are being looked into, and they're saying there was some arbitrary deposits here and there, but the reality is there were less than 5 million each. So that's not something to take home and say, oh, you know, we've succeeded here. Because 900 accounts that are probably been flagged with about 5 million shillings, that's little. We are talking about, and that in total is coming to about 20 billion for information. And we're talking about 227 1.7 billion. Now, that's a huge gap in our economy, and the government must also explain to us whether they had the right figures, because we cannot blame the public 100% and squarely and say, oh, you're holding the money. Nobody will hold 100 million and not take it to the bank, or not to try to sanitize it. So the question must now be rolled back to CBK and say, were you giving us a figure that you cooked, or you gave us a figure that you knew 100% that was out there? And if it's so, why haven't you gotten it back for us?
All right. Honorable Tambo, maybe just the question now of corruption. Because one of the main things that central bank was trying to do, or government was trying to do, is to ensure that those who may be holding illicit money either bring it in, and by that way, either they'll be caught or questioned, or secondly, have them locked out. Would you say this exercise has been successful in regards to corruption?
No, because if you are corrupt, you are corrupt. And if you are corrupt and you did hide the old notes, you will still hide the new notes. That's one thing. But if you are corrupt, you must be smart. And I want to tell you, criminology and he will tell you, and development goes together. If you find a way of trying to get those people, they will also find a way of trying to get out of it. I will tell you, and I'm not sure, but it's my thinking that those who are corrupt, they were the first people to think on how to change that money. And maybe they did it. Maybe what we are talking about is the money from the corrupt people. It's what came back. For those who are not corrupt, it's those who don't know what to do with it. Like Weda, because I know he's not corrupt. He don't know what to do with this 1,000 shillings. But those who are smart were the first people to change that money.
Money.
Yes, it was very easy to do that.
They may not be that smart because the 100 billion is still missing.
That's what I'm saying. Those who don't know, those who are smart. Because corrupt people are smart people. Not just people like any other, not like Mutambos and good friends who are seated here. Those who are corrupt, those people who know how to make $1 billion, they can know how to get $1 billion from the hiding place to the bank. They know.
How
but
to
those who don't know, they will not.
All
Michael, right. You just were smart, but you don't know how to make $1 billion.
$1 billion.
you don't know how to make $1 billion.
That's probably why I'm seated here, especially
another
illegally.
thing just to mention. The reason why the government was changing this money, it was because of constitutional issue. Because the constitutional actually demanded that the money had to be changed. Let us get that one clear. It did not say change the money and put a deadline for 1,000 and not 100 shillings. It did not say that. So all the currencies should have been operated. This came from central bank, which actually is mandated to do so.
Okay. All right. You wanted to...
Yeah, very quickly. And again, Mike, this issue of corruption, yes, at the end of the day, probably at the end of the tunnel, yes, it will end up being money, but I don't think, when you talk about corruption, I don't think it's legal tender sensitive alone. Corruption, like we've just read about the land in Mombasa. I mean, for me, to deal in matters land, to steal land, that is still corruption, even though, the end product could be, I'm just hiving it off for later use. Like Mheshimiwa has alluded to, corrupt people will find means. So it matters and it borders more on governance than anything else. If we really want to fight corruption, we must set up structures that ensure responsibility, accountability, and transparency. Once that is done, you fight as much as possible to make sure that this person does not come into contact with that which will ensure that he continues to pull resources away from the Mwananchi and the public for his use or his personal use, and you just make sure the man is accountable. So yes, you can see from one end the fact that the government was looking to get this money. Yes, it will deal a blow into corruption, but I don't think it will alleviate in totality the war on corruption. The war on corruption must be won on governance and transparency.
Okay, I want us to move on to something else because of time. And of course, we are still talking about spending. And Ambassador Ukur Yatani, the CS for Treasury, introduced new austerity measures. Now, public spending by government officials has been tightened. And of course, these are issues that we've had before. This particular term, austerity measures, is a term that we have had before. But let's just listen into a story before we have discussion regarding this and how that is likely to benefit Kenyans, particularly when it comes to the Big Four agenda.
In an effort to rein in the fiscal deficit from 7.7% to target 5.6% for the 2019-2020 financial year, Acting Finance Cabinet Secretary Ukur Yatani has drawn the line in a move that is set to see the government cut back on public spending. According to a circular to all cabinet secretaries and accounting officers, the raft of measures are in black and white. The number of officers in government delegations travelling abroad has been capped at 4 persons. The extravagant benchmarking trips are no more, as the government has frozen them until further notice. Further, Treasury has capped the acquisition of new spaces by ministries to guidelines set by the Infrastructure Ministry, while trimming the value of new furniture purchases at 75% over the next 3 years. This even as the measures are set to restrict the use of government transport outside the official working hours unless authorized by the accounting officer. Communication allowances are also set to be reviewed with the goal of reducing it by 30%, with training set to be conducted within the government training institutions locally. The measures are also set to be duplicated by the counties, this coming in the backdrop of criticism directed at the government's dependency on borrowing in order to meet the recurring fiscal needs. Jesse Rogers, KTN News.
The austerity measures, they're being introduced by government. This is not the first time we've had this announced. It's not the first time we've had the president talk about it, but there you go. Let me start with you, Muthuma, on your thoughts on this particular move by government to try and cut down on expenditure.
The austerity measures, Mike, this is not the first time we are hearing of them, and I don't think this is the last time. But as we build on the austerity, remember we are going to hurt businesses. You've just had the good CS talking about reduction of airtime and allowing, government officers to go and use the internet. It is the very same thing. It is data. So if you cut by 30%, what are you telling the likes of Safaricom? What are you telling the workers at Safaricom? All right, albeit the fact that you're going to up on the data. When you talk about cutting on local furnitures, what are you telling the woodworkers? All right, people who depend highly on government. Yes, you want to cut the cost, but then again, I think you're going to kill some businesses. So I think this is where you look at, it is a very dicey situation, because as you cut on government, yes, of course, another industry is going to be affected. But I think it can be remedied, Mike. And I honestly believe if we can allow, vibrancy into the private sector, and I think we are going to make even. And by this, I'm talking about the interest cap. This we must talk about, Mike, and we must deliberately emphasize on it. As we cut through government, we must allow it to actually grow and thrive in the private sector. For instance, we were just reading to you what companies are now crying. The 20%, interest, that is being provided through KRA, may actually go and hurt businesses. People are looking at how to save. Employees are going to be sent home. So what tax regime will it apply? What incentive will the government be giving? Because I believe in the long run, this is what will make the change. If the government is going to stick more onto SMEs and allow them to still get banks from, to get loans from the banks, they will run away from the sharks. Banks also, something has to be done. And Mheshimiwa, here you have to help Kenyans. Banks are still not lending to SMEs. And I can understand, I know the banks must work on their risk, and what have you. But they have left the SMEs out in the cold. The banks are now liking to trade with government because they'll tell you government is not risky. For us to just open we are not getting money through the interest that we expected. We are capped by government. So the banks are all there about making money. And as much as we understand that, there has to be a deliberate sit down between the banks and our private sector, which must be conducted by government, because that's the only way. As government reduces their spending, which can be allowed and which can be understood, they must give life and longevity to private sector.
All right, Honorable Mtambo, your thoughts on the austerity measures and government trying to cut down this, like Muthuma says, is definitely going to injure, particularly the SMEs. Yes. And those are the backbone of the Mwananchi. That's where the Mwananchi lives.
Actually, it's not only backbone of Mwananchi, it's also the backbone of the government, because government thrives on taxes. And you get taxes from the manufacturers, you get taxes from the people who consume the goods. And if the goods are not consumed, then you will not get the taxes. That is number one. Then number two, when you are doing whatever you're doing, you need to think at the repercussions. Okay, because you may think that whatever you are doing is the best thing, but it may end up hurting you more than actually what you wanted to do. And I will take one case, and I would want us to analyze it here. When you say that all the vehicles not to be moving outside working hours, what does that mean? That tells you that every vehicle which must take Mutambo to wherever he lives after work, he has to be on the road by 5. You get into that road, you bump into a jam. You will stay there for 5 hours. That car will be running. It will consume more other than when you tell me leave your office at 7
p.m.
or past 8, which will take me maybe 15 or 20 minutes to get to where I go. So which one is helping you? You need also to be outside the box. Because the moment you say you don't want to see any government vehicle or past these working hours, that means after 5 o'clock, okay, get into a car, go to where you are supposed to be taken to. That means you are going to spend more than what you want to save. Those are the things before you even say them out there. You need to think
there are issues
twice.
like government-sponsored courses to be provided in the country. Would that be a good move, given that, I mean, we've seen benchmarking has cost this country a lot, yet we do not see the translation of what they learn put to
that is a
practice.
plus. That is a plus. I totally agree into that. And that also contributes also now to the economy we are talking about. Because if benchmarking or if the courses the training are being conducted in the country, what will happen is that the money they spend will be spent in the country locally, and that money will be plowed back. I know what may not agree with that. It is more easier to bring that person you want to teach.
Absolutely.
If you want to learn from one person, it is more easier to import that person, to import that person to your country and let them sit there. I want to tell you, I've been to this organization. I've been a member of parliament. I've gone to all these trips. I will tell you, you don't know what you learn. Because you go out there, most of the people, they go out just for the per diem. It is very few, and I would say very few, I'm not saying all, who bring in something or who take something off.
Profitable and beneficial.
But the rest, they just go out for what we call per diem. They don't get anything and they don't learn nothing.
And they also don't translate.
Actually, I have not seen anything which we have changed. That we went to this place, we learned this, and then now we have changed. And a good case is the MCS. When this devolution started, MCS were all over trying to benchmark. What did they benchmark? What do we have in the counties? Zero.
Nothing. All right, Michael Agwanda, your thoughts on the austerity measures?
I want to have one example I want to give. I read in the report that Parliament consumes 1.9 billion in local traveling alone. Local traveling, maybe air or going to the constituency. I multiplied that with 316 members of parliament and got an average of about 6 million per parliamentarian. And then I divided that with about 12 months and got an average of about 500,000 per parliamentarian every single month. When you divide that by 30, we want to give them a good bonus. Even weekends, we give them there. By 30, you get about 16,700 per day. Remember that there are members of parliament that are here in Nairobi, and you give them about 16,700 a day for their fuel or traveling allowances because this is local. Now, that's where the austerity measure needs to begin. And I can tell you for free that an MP can drive, and a number of members of parliament I've seen, I don't know whether he used to drive by himself, I've seen driving. Mwaura, for example, Honorable Mwaura drives himself in a small car to parliament. Not all parliamentarians want to behave that way, but when we're talking about cutting cost, again, this is just like Muduma said, we hear this every single year, but who leads in ensuring that their cost goes up every single year? The office of the presidency, the office of the deputy president, that goes without fail. The statistics are there. Over 700 million just local travel. We've not put about some other few billions for international travels. When we're talking about Treasury went over their budget in 2017, 2018, 400 times. And the question is, if we have a budget already that has already been cut by but done by the government and the treasury and allocations done, how are you going to make sure that that money is not used? And so we are bringing these austerity measures when we already disbursed the money to those specific ministries. And then when they return the money back, what will we say? We'll say, oh, they don't know how to use this money. And so this is just a PR in my view. On 2015, on the 19th October 2015, Rotich came out and gave us all these things, and we can go back and read what he said. Nothing took place. We know that 10 years ago, exactly 10 years ago, our president or Minister of Finance at that particular time, and he did not, he said, look, gentlemen, no four-wheelers, you'll be driving Passats, and we drove the Passat, and what happened soon after that? Now we have four-wheelers, not just four-wheelers, but we have now upgraded chase car four-wheelers that are following this guy. So really, when you tell us austerity measures and then we still have a four-wheeler chasing another four-wheeler and
driving on the wrong side of the road for that matter. Whether we are really out of time, I'll need you just to give you your remarks.
Let me tell you, austerity that's to do with emotional economics. The government is the biggest spender. And when the economy is going into depression, the government needs to spend. When you hear ministers saying we are going to hold government seminars in government institutions, they are simply saying Serena, all these big hotels, close down. That's what he's saying. He does not see where his tax comes from and where he should spend. He does not see that when a vehicle is on the road, somebody is running a petrol station and people are employed. They don't see it. When government wants to spur economic growth, they spend. What he should have come up with is to minimize wastage. Where do you minimize wastage? Number one, corruption. Interest on pending bills is running into billions. Unnecessary interest on international loans. There are loans which should have been retired and paid. Those are the ones, and you do it and you finalize. But coming to say now, we will not read the newspapers, so who does he want to read those newspapers? He should see the connection between this newspaper
and the employment
and his taxes and his work as a minister. If he is blind to that, he is doing voodoo economics that will bring this country down. It has never worked. This austerity, we are now taking one cup of tea, we are doing, he does not see the tea, and he sees the milk, and he sees the economy of Kericho, and he sees the economy of Kiambu. That kind of a minister should be brought here with Nyaunyo, with teaching real economics.
Gentlemen, we'll have to wind up because of time. It's already way past time. Thank you very much, Ambrose Weda, who is a lawyer, Honorable Joe Mutambo, Michael Agwanda, and Gabriel Muthuma for joining us this morning. And that's the way it is. The time is 9 minutes after 8. We're going to take a short break, but do stay with us. Today is Monday, so we'll be looking at matters sports. We take that break.